I have a little bit of a surprise. We're going to read from outside today. It's too nice to be inside. So, we do chapter 14 today. Just because we had the whole weekend in between, I'll just remind you that on Friday when I read, there was a fire in the woods behind Grandpa Reston's house where the cabin is. And the fire department was going in to fight the fire, and Jamie decided that she was going to use her father's old fire department equipment and go into the woods to try to rescue Atticus herself. But she got disoriented by the smoke when she got into the woods, and then she fell and hurt her knee and couldn't run anymore. And fortunately, a couple of firefighters were able to come to her rescue and get her out of the woods. And her Uncle Craig also carried Atticus out of the woods. He had some smoke inhalation, but otherwise he was doing fine. So they're going to take him to the vet now to be checked out. Chapter 14, Facing the Music. The attention was suddenly riveted on Grandpa Reston. How do you know the candles weren't burning? Jamie stammered. He stroked his chin before answering. It was a telltale sign that there was a lot going on in his head. Because I was out there this morning. At the cabin? He nodded. I put two and two together last night when I was thinking about your sudden interest in the woods, so I went out to see for myself. But I had a lock on the door, Jamie said. And there are windows to see in, he countered. I made sure Atticus was okay, and believe me, if there had been candles going, I would have seen them. The fire didn't start at the cabin, Uncle Craig interjected. Now all the attention shifted to him. It looks like someone had a campfire down by the pond and didn't fully put it out. All it took was a little breeze to stir up the ashes and it rekindled. Everything's so dry it didn't take much to get things going. Any idea who was there? Grandpa asked. Tag Bentley's at the scene with our fire marshal right now. We're pretty sure it was a group of teenagers he's been watching for underage drinking. He just wasn't sure where they were going for their parties. Jamie's shoulders suddenly felt lighter. Because of her guilty conscience, she'd carried enough weight on them the last few days. It was a relief to not have the responsibility of the fire on them, too. Grandpa turned toward Jamie's mother. What I didn't know until we got out here was that Atticus was supposed to be on a plane this morning. If I'd known, I would have called you. He returned his attention to Jamie. You could have talked to me yesterday when I offered. You can trust me. He tipped his head toward her mother. And you can trust your mom, too. Any of us. Jamie cast her eyes down. I know, Grandpa, but will any of you ever trust me again? A hand settled on her shoulder and caressed her. She knew her mother's touch. It had comforted her for her whole life. Trust is something that's earned. You made a big mistake. Her mother hesitated and added softly, a very big mistake. So now it's up to you to prove you deserve to earn our trust back. I didn't really think through my decision to take Atticus. Once I hit him, all of a sudden so many things happened that I hadn't planned and couldn't control. And those things were all because people loved and cared about me. The posters the kids in my class made, the story in the newspaper, Mr. Hubbard's reward, I never expected any of that. Her mother placed her warm palm against Jamie's cheek. Don't ever underestimate the power of love. Jamie stared at her mother, a response on the tip of her tongue. It was a powerful love and fear of loss that had driven her to take Atticus to begin with. She knew all about the power of love. Before she could explain, her mother's cell phone rang. Excuse me, her mother said. She pulled the phone out of her pocket and looked at it, then pressed a button. Hello? Her forehead wrinkled and her eyes flicked toward Jamie. Uh-huh. She nodded. I see. I think it will be all right. There was another pause. No, you keep going so he gets treated. I'll bring her. Bye. She pressed N on her phone and glanced back at Jamie. It seems there's a certain dog that has been hanging his head over the seat and whining since he left here. Charlotte thinks he's looking for someone in particular. Everyone turned and looked at Jamie. She couldn't stop the smile that started as a warm, fuzzy feeling inside and spread to her face. Her mother looked to Sharon. Charlotte asked if I could take Jamie and meet her at the vet clinic. What do you think about her knee? Well, let's see. Sharon turned her attention back to Jamie. Let me know if anything hurts. She lifted the ice pack, poked and prodded. A sharp pain shot up Jamie's leg. She ground her teeth together, wishing she could hide the truth. It hurts a little, but not terribly, she acknowledged. Sharon placed her hand under Jamie's knee and lifted. Can you bend it? The swelling was obvious, but no worse than a few minutes before. Jamie complied with Sharon's request. She held her breath, bracing herself for the worst, but when she started to bend it, it wasn't as bad as it had been right after she fell in the woods. It's better. Jamie sat up straighter. It really is better than when I first fell. She turned to her mother. Please, Mom, can I go? Well, I don't know. I think if she keeps it elevated as much as possible and ices it, she should be okay until you can get it x-rayed, Sharon said. Grandpa Reston patted his truck. I can take you over to the clinic in this. Jamie's mom nodded. Thanks, that would be great since I rode here with Charlotte. Uncle Craig stepped to the tailgate. Let me put you in the cab, he said as he lifted Jamie into his arms. Sharon kept her hands under Jamie's knee to help stabilize it. It still hurt with each step her uncle took, but it wasn't enough to keep her from seeing Atticus. She slid onto the truck seat and moved to the middle to leave room for her mother and grandfather on either side of her. Uncle Craig, Jamie said before he moved away from the door. He bent below the frame and placed his hands on the seat. With the big fire coat on, he looked so much like her father. Yeah? Jamie swallowed hard, trying not to cry. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused. I know I didn't start the fire, but I added problems because you had to carry Atticus out. She glanced toward Sharon. And I know it was dumb to run into the woods. I promise I'll think before I do something like that again. He nodded, then leaned across the seat and kissed Jamie on the cheek. We all make mistakes, kiddo. The important question is, did you learn any lessons? Jamie rolled her eyes. Boy, did I. Good. Then next time, leave the rescuing to me. Your big, strapping hero uncle, okay? He winked at her. Jamie nodded, then lifted her finger in front of her chest. I promise, cross my heart, hope. She stopped abruptly. Without meaning to, she'd brought her dad right into the middle of this moment. Then she wondered if maybe he'd been with her all along. Thank you, Uncle Craig. You were a hero today. He chuckled. I don't know about that, but I hope Atticus will be all right. He pulled back out of the truck, and her mother and grandfather moved in on either side of Jamie. Let's go check on your pal, her grandfather said as he turned the key in the ignition. Jamie watched her uncle put on his fire gloves and helmet. He grabbed an axe from the back of the fire engine and returned to the woods with Sharon and Steve. Light smoke drifted out and wrapped around them as they disappeared into the thick brush. When Jamie thought about how horribly this all could have ended, something inside her curled and quivered. She had definitely learned her lesson. Atticus was already in an examining room when Jamie, her mother, and grandfather arrived. The clinic door was locked, but when they rang the bell, a technician opened it for them. You're here for Atticus? The young woman asked. The hospital smock she wore was plastered with a multicolored dog bone pattern. She held the door open for them to enter. How is he? Jamie asked as she hopped in on one foot, supported by her mother and grandfather on either side. I'll let the doctor tell you, but he seems to be holding his own just fine. The technician locked the door and then crossed the room to an interior door past the receptionist's counter. I'll wait out here, Grandpa Reston said. He sat on one of the padded benches that lined the waiting room walls. He immediately reached for a magazine about dogs. Jamie and her mother followed the technician down a short hall to a room on the right. Atticus had been put on a silver examining table, and he lay on his side, his tongue lolling out of the side of his mouth. As soon as Jamie entered the room, he picked his head up, then tried to sit. His eyes looked clearer and much more focused than when he'd left the fire scene. A faint odor of the smoke permeated the room. Well, well, Dr. Walker said. Judging from my patient's reaction, I guess we have a VIP coming into the room. He allowed Atticus to roll into a laying position. Can I come closer? Jamie asked. Certainly, Dr. Walker responded. I think Atticus would be more comfortable with you near. How is he? Not sure where to go, she moved to the end of the table near Atticus's tail. It looks like he's recovered very well from the smoke inhalation, the veterinarian explained. His breathing is good and his lungs sound clear. The oxygen the firefighters gave him probably made a huge difference. I was surprised they had a canine mask, Charlotte said. She stood on the far side of the table holding one of Atticus's front paws. Dr. Walker nodded. I donated both a canine and feline mask to the fire department a couple of years ago after I had that fire here. It was my way of thanking them. To my knowledge, this is the first time they've had to use either one of them. Charlotte smiled. I'm glad it was available. When the technician tried to get by, Jamie moved out of the way and next to Charlotte. At this angle, she saw dried blood crusted on the pads of Atticus's paw. Alarm shot through her. Why is he bleeding? The technician handed Dr. Walker a bottle of clear liquid and several gauze pads. I'm going to guess he has a very big splinter in between his pads, the veterinarian said as he doused the gauze with rubbing alcohol. The antiseptic smell filled the room. Jamie begged to get a closer look. From what? Charlotte said he was locked in some kind of crude wooden structure. By the way he worded the remark, Jamie wasn't sure if he was asking for confirmation or telling what he knew. It's an old cabin my father and uncle built a long time ago, Jamie explained. Dr. Walker nodded. My best guess is that when the smoke started filling the cabin, he panicked and tried to dig his way out through the wood. If it was unfinished wood, that would explain a splinter this size embedded so deep. His theory shocked her, and she straightened to look at the veterinarian. He could do that? A frightened animal is capable of a great deal of destruction. He was scared, and he wanted out. So yeah, he could and probably did do that. Tears of guilt sprang to Jamie's eyes. She stepped around Charlotte and moved to Atticus's head. She pressed her cheek against his ear, and dropped an arm across his shoulders. I'm sorry, Addie. I'm so sorry. Dr. Walker laid the alcohol-soaked pad against the paw, and Atticus jerked. Jamie squeezed him tighter, wishing she could take the pain instead of him. She knew all too well the sting of alcohol against an open wound. After cleaning the foot, Dr. Walker donned special magnifying glasses, then examined Atticus's paw more closely. After a moment, he took another sharp metal instrument and pressed it against the wound. Atticus yelped and jerked his entire body. The doctor straightened, shaking his head. I think I'm going to have to give him general anesthesia to surgically remove that, Charlotte. That's a big piece of wood, and it's in there deep. I don't want him to suffer, and if he pulls back suddenly, it could do more damage to the pads than there already is. Oh, boy, Charlotte sighed. She stroked Atticus's leg with her fingertips. Atticus relaxed and pushed his muzzle against Jamie's arm. Well, if it's what you have to do, then do it. It would be cruel to make him endure the procedure without putting him out, the doctor said. Charlotte squeezed her eyes shut. I'm afraid to ask, but how much will it cost? Let's just do it and talk about costs afterward, he suggested. But Charlotte started to protest, but Jamie interrupted. I'll pay for it. This is my fault. I'll pay the bill. She wiped away the tears that had streaked down her cheeks. Charlotte swung toward her eyes wide with surprise. No, Jamie, it'll be too much. I'll take care of whatever it costs, Jamie insisted. I've been saving my money for 2 years to lease a horse at Old J Farms, so I should have enough. This is more important, and it's my responsibility. Charlotte glanced at Jamie's mom. Her mom shrugged. She's right, Char. She does have the money, and she should be the one to make the sacrifice, not you. Dr. Walker cleared his throat. Now that we have that settled, why don't the three of you go into the waiting room? And Karen, I will take care of Atticus. It shouldn't be long. Charlotte patted Atticus's side, and Jamie kissed the top of his head before reluctantly stepping out of the room. Atticus lurched up again when he realized they were leaving, but Dr. Walker and Karen held him in place until the door swung shut. Jamie could hear the two of them talking gently to soothe him. Jamie and her mom joined her grandfather in the waiting room. He was thumbing through the same dog magazine, but he didn't appear to be seriously interested in the contents. He looked up when they came through the door and tossed the magazine aside. What's the verdict? He asked. Jamie settled on the bench next to him, and he immediately put his arm around her and tucked her against his shoulder. Dr. Walker has to do surgery on Atticus's paw because there's a big splinter of wood in between the pads, Jamie explained. Is that the only problem? Charlotte spoke up. Fortunately, yes. She and Jamie's mom sat on the bench adjacent to Jamie and her grandfather. Jamie leaned her head back against her grandfather and let her eyelids slip closed. Exhaustion washed over her like an ocean wave. Her mind drifted, and after a few minutes, she even forgot where she was. It was quiet for some time before her mother broke the silence. You have some major explaining to do, Jamie. Startled by the sudden intrusion in the quiet room, Jamie bolted upright under her grandfather's arm. She blinked several times in an attempt to orient herself. I know. Jamie forced her eyes open. The bright light shining through the clinic windows momentarily blinded her. Then, when her eyes adjusted, Jamie could see what had apparently prompted her mother to make that comment. Tag Bentley's patrol car was pulling into a parking space, followed by a silver car that took the next spot. Jamie craned her neck to see the driver of the second car. When the man pulled himself from the driver's seat, she stifled a gasp. Although she'd only seen him once, she recognized the other man immediately. So that's the end of chapter 14. And I'll move so that you can see this view that's behind me. It is a gorgeous day. Maybe I'll even pick this up. It is absolutely gorgeous out. Yep, there are the girls enjoying the nice weather. And that's the Bristol Hills back there in the background. Actually, the Bristol Hills are more in that direction. Whoops. Let's not lose our camera. We still have snow fence up. Hopefully soon we can take that down. So this is the Great Finger Lakes. And this is why I use it as the setting for my books when I can, because it is just beautiful here. Beyond the horses, beyond those trees behind them, is Canandaigua Lake. So you're looking at the hills on the other side of the lake. Thanks for watching. We'll read chapter 15 tomorrow. And have a great sunny afternoon and stay healthy. Bye.